I was never supposed to see that live stream. Yet there was my family, clinking champagne glasses at a closing dinner for my grandfather's house, laughing like they had won the lottery. My mother smiled into the lens and said it was a relief I was not there to ruin the vibe. They had no idea Grandpa had prepared for exactly this betrayal. The moment they sold that house, they triggered a trap they could never undo. My name is Hazel Lawson, and the only thing keeping me upright at 2 a.m. was the smell of linseed oil and the rigid discipline of a deadline. I stood in the center of the sable and stone restoration workshop, surrounded by the skeletal remains of high-end antiques that wealthy people in Port Mason had forgotten they owned until they needed a conversation piece. My hands were coated in a fine gray dust, and there was a streak of dark walnut stain drying under my fingernails that would probably take 3 days to scrub out. I was not supposed to be awake. I was certainly not supposed to be checking my personal notifications, but when your phone vibrates against a heavy workbench with the persistence of an angry hornet, you look. I wiped my hands on a rag that was more stain than fabric and picked up the device. The screen was blindingly bright in the dim workshop. It was a notification from Facebook. Aunt Marlene was live. That in itself was not unusual. Marlene documented everything from her morning bagel to her questionable attempts at watercolor painting, but the title of this live stream made the muscles in my neck tighten instantly. Closing night, I stared at the words. Closing night. The phrase hung there, innocent and heavy at the same time. I unlocked my phone, leaving a smudge of sawdust on the glass, and tapped the notification. The video load time felt like it took 10 years, buffering through the weak workshop Wi-Fi. Then, the pixelated image sharpened into clarity. The audio hissed with the background noise of a crowded room before settling into the familiar, clinking sounds of silverware and expensive laughter. The camera was shaky. Marlene was clearly holding her phone with one hand while balancing a drink in the other. She panned across a room I did not recognize, but I recognized the type of room immediately. It was one of those private dining alcoves at the Oarsman, the kind with mahogany walls and leather banquettes where Port Mason's elite went to congratulate themselves on being rich. "Say hi, everyone," Marlene's voice grated through the tiny speaker. "We are celebrating." The camera swung wildly, inducing a momentary bout of motion sickness, before landing on the guest of honor, my mother. Cynthia Lawson looked radiant. She was wearing that cream silk blouse she usually saved for charity galas, the one that cost more than my entire tool set. Her hair was perfectly blown out, catching the warm light of the chandelier above her. She held a flute of champagne, her face flushed with the specific, giddy high of a woman who has just secured a massive wire transfer. My father, Gordon, sat next to her, loosening his tie. He looked smug. That was the only word for it. He looked like a man who had just cheated at cards and gotten away with it. "To fresh starts," my mother said, raising her glass. The table cheered. I counted 8 people, the local realtor, a man named Sharp, who smiled with too many teeth, was there. A notary I vaguely recognized from town was there. And right in the center, basking in the attention like a lizard on a warm rock, was my sister, Sloane. She was already looking at her own phone, probably checking the engagement on a post she had just made about this very dinner. She looked up just as Marlene zoomed in. "We missed Hazel," Marlene chirped, though her tone suggested she missed Hazel about as much as she missed a root canal. "Should we call her?" The table went quiet for a fraction of a second. The air in the workshop seemed to drop 10 degrees. My mother laughed, a tinkling, dismissive sound that I had heard my entire life. "Oh, God, no," she said, waving her hand as if swatting away a fly. "At least Hazel isn't here to make this weird. You know how she gets. She is too intense." "She would ruin the vibe," my father added, reaching for a bread roll. "She gets so sentimental about wood rot. It is exhausting." I stood there, frozen, the phone gripping my hand like a vice. They were talking about Grandpa's house. There was no other closing that would warrant a dinner at the Oarsman, but that was impossible. "She will calm down," my mother continued, taking a sip of her champagne. "She always does. Once she realizes this is for the best, we needed the liquidity, and frankly, that place was a money pit." Sloane looked directly into the camera lens, her eyes bright with malice. Honestly, it is better this way. Hazel was only useful when Grandpa needed rides to the clinic or someone to change his diapers. Now that he is gone, the house can finally make money. We are freeing the asset. Freeing the asset. I felt a physical blow to my stomach, a hollow thud that knocked the wind out of me. I leaned back against the workbench, my legs suddenly feeling like they were made of water. Grandpa Elliot had died 4 months ago, for the last 3 years of his life. I was the one who drove over there every single morning before work to make his coffee. I was the one who fixed the leaking roof in the middle of a thunderstorm because Dad couldn't be bothered to leave his golf game. I was the one who sat with him through the confusion, the pain, and the long, quiet afternoons when he just wanted to tell the same stories about the war for the 100th time. Sloane had visited twice. Both times, she stayed for 20 minutes, took a selfie with him for her followers, captioned it, "Cherish your elders," and left. But that was not the part that made my blood run cold. The part that made the room spin was the fact that I knew what Grandpa's will said. I knew because he had shown it to me. We had sat at his kitchen table 6 months before he passed. He had looked me in the eye, his hands trembling with Parkinson's, and told me that the house was mine. He said he was leaving it to me because I was the only one who saw it as a home, not a portfolio item. So how are they celebrating a closing? Show us the papers, make it official, Marlene shouted, pivoting the camera toward the center of the table. The realtor, sharp, laughed and tapped a thick folder resting on the white tablecloth. Ink is dry. Ladies and gentlemen, recorded and done. The camera zoomed in on the documents. The image was slightly blurry, but modern phone cameras are unforgivingly good. I pinched the screen to zoom in further, my dirty fingers leaving streaks on the glass. I saw the header, Commonwealth of Virginia, deed of sale, and there, just below the bold text, I saw the property address, 420 Harbor View Lane. The breath trapped in my throat turned into a sharp, jagged thing. It was real. They had actually done it. They had sold Grandpa's house. I stared at the screen, waiting for the tears. That is what you're supposed to do in these moments, right? You are supposed to cry. You are supposed to scream. You are supposed to throw the nearest heavy object through a window. But I did not cry. I went still. It was a terrifying kind of stillness. It was the way you go still when you step off a curb and realize a bus is coming, and for a split second, clarity overrides fear. The exhaustion that had been weighing on me all night evaporated. The throbbing in my feet vanished. The smell of the chemicals and the sawdust faded away. All I could see was my mother's smiling face on that screen. All I could hear was Sloane saying I was only useful when Grandpa needed rides. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the obedient, quiet daughter who would sulk for a week and then come back to the fold because I wanted their approval. They thought they could bypass a will, sell my inheritance out from under me, and gaslight me into thinking it was for the family's greater good. They were toasting to their victory. They were drinking champagne bought with money that, by rights, belonged to me. But more importantly, they were celebrating the erasure of the one place where I had felt safe. To the future, my father bellowed on the screen. To the future, the table echoed. I moved my thumb and tapped the end video button. The noise of their celebration cut off instantly, replaced by the humming silence of the workshop and the low buzz of the ventilation fan. I stood there for a long minute in the dark. I looked at my hands. They were rough, calloused, stained with the work I did every day. These were hands that built things. These were hands that fixed things that were broken. My family thought they were architects of the world, moving money and assets around like pieces on a board. They did not understand that when you restore old things for a living, you learn how to spot rot. You learn that sometimes. You cannot just paint over the damage. Sometimes, you have to strip everything down to the bone. Okay, I whispered into the empty room. The word sounded loud. It sounded like a gavel coming down. I walked over to the utility sink and washed my hands. I scrubbed them with the abrasive soap until the skin was raw and red. Watching the dark water swirl down the drain, I dried them methodically. Then, I walked to the small office in the corner of the workshop and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue, casting harsh shadows across my face. I was not going to call them. I was not going to text Sloane and give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my temper. If I called now, they would tell me I was hysterical. They would tell me I didn't understand finance. They would spin a web of lies so thick I would choke on it. No, I was clocking in. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a job. I logged into my secure email server. My fingers flew across the keys, entering passwords with a mechanical precision. I needed to see the trail. If they had sold the house, there was a record. If there was a record, there were timestamps. Just as my inbox loaded, a new email notification slid into the top right corner of the screen. It was from a service I had completely forgotten about, 2 years ago, when Grandpa started getting paranoid about mail theft. I had signed him up for the county's automated recording alert system. I had put my email down because Grandpa didn't use a computer. I had never received a single alert until tonight. The subject line was stark and administrative. County Clerk Recording Alert. Document recorded. I clicked it. Type Warranty Deed. Grantor Elliot Langford. Grantee Brackenton Redevelopment Group. Date recorded. Today. The timestamp was 4 hours ago. My heart hammered a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Grantor Elliot Langford. Grandpa was dead. Dead men do not sign deeds. A cold smile touched my lips. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a mechanic who has just found the cut brake line and knows exactly who held the knife. They had not just sold my house. They had forged a dead man's signature to do it. My mother was right about one thing. I was intense, and as I stared at that digital confirmation, I realized she had absolutely no idea what that intensity looked like when it was aimed at her. I cracked my knuckles, the sound sharp in the quiet office. The live stream was over, but the show was just beginning. The glow of the laptop screen was beginning to burn my eyes, but I could not look away. The county record was a cold, digital tombstone, but the house it described was alive. To the county, it was parcel number 492. To Brackenton Redevelopment Group, it was a teardown on a prime lot. To my family, it was a check with 6 zeros, but to me, that house was the smell of cedar dust and Old Spice. It was the vibration of a belt sander humming through the floorboards on a rainy Tuesday. I leaned back in my office chair, the leather creaking in the silence of the shop, and I let the memory wash over me. It was not a vague, fuzzy nostalgia. It was sharp and high definition. The way all my memories of that place were. I was 12 years old. It was mid-July. The kind of Virginia humidity that sticks your shirt to your back the second you step outside. We were on the wraparound porch, the one that faced the bay. The railing had rot in the lower spindles, water damage from years of storms rolling off the Atlantic. My father had suggested hiring a contractor to rip it all out and put in vinyl. He said vinyl was maintenance-free. He said wood was a hassle. Grandpa Elliot had looked at him with a quiet sort of pity and said that plastic has no soul. So there I was, 12 years old, holding a piece of sandpaper while Grandpa showed me how to match the grain of a new spindle to the old rail. "You have to listen to it, Hazel," he had said, his voice gravelly and low. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the wood, running his thumb over the raw oak. Wood has a memory. It remembers the wind that bent it. It remembers the rain that fed it. If you try to force it, it will split. You have to work with the grain. I remembered watching his hands. They were huge hands, battered and scarred from a lifetime of building things, but they were incredibly gentle. He treated that porch rail with more respect than my mother treated most of her friends. "Why doesn't Sloane have to help?" I had asked, wiping sweat from my forehead. I was jealous. Sloane was inside in the air conditioning, watching cartoons. Grandpa had stopped sanding. He turned to me, and his blue eyes were serious. "Because Sloane looks at this porch and sees a place to sit. You look at this porch and see how it stands up. There is a difference. Hazel, some people consume the world, and some people build it. You are a builder." That was the moment I fell in love with restoration. It was not just about fixing old things, it was about being the person who understood how things stood up. Over the last 20 years, I became the person who kept that house standing, in every sense of the word. It started small, weeding the garden when Grandpa's back started giving him trouble, painting the trim. Then, as he got older and the tremors of Parkinson's started to steal the steadiness of his hands, I took over the heavy lifting. I was there every morning at 7 o'clock to make sure he took his pills. I organized his medications in those little plastic day-of-the-week containers, because if I didn't, he would forget. My mother called it Hazel's little nursing hobby. She would drop by once every 2 weeks, usually on her way to a luncheon, and breeze through the front door in a cloud of expensive perfume. "Oh, Dad, the place smells like sawdust," she would complain, kissing the air next to his cheek. "We really should get you a cleaning service, or maybe it is time to look at that assisted living facility near the golf course. It is very resort style." Grandpa would just smile that tight, polite smile he reserved for people he didn't respect and say he was fine. And Sloan was the worst of them. She treated the house like a stage set. When she started her influencer career, she would come over on Sunday afternoons when the light was golden hour perfect. She would drag antique chairs out onto the lawn, pose with a book she had never opened, and snap 300 photos. "Grandpa, come get in this one. Look cute," she would command. He would shuffle over, leaning on his cane, and she would wrap an arm around him, beaming for the camera. The caption would always be something like, "So blessed to spend quality time with my heart. Family is everything." Then, 5 minutes later, she would be gone, leaving the chairs on the lawn for me to drag back inside. She never asked how he was feeling. She never asked about the doctor's appointments. She certainly never offered to pick up his prescriptions. I was the one driving him to the cardiologist, waiting in the sterile waiting rooms for hours, holding his hand when the news wasn't good. I was the one who learned how to navigate the complex maze of his dietary restrictions. I was the one who knew which floorboard in the hallway creaked so I wouldn't wake him when I checked on him at night. And I was the one who paid for it. I minimized the browser window with the deed and opened my online banking portal. I needed to see the numbers. I needed to see the quantifiable proof of my own stupidity. I scrolled back, not just months, but years. 3 years ago. The old boiler in the basement had finally died. It was February, and the house was freezing. Grandpa called me, shivering, his voice thin and scared. He didn't have the $6,000 for a new system. His pension was small, and his savings had been drained by the property taxes my parents promised to help with, but never did. I paid for the boiler. I wrote the check from my savings account, the money I had been putting away for my own workshop expansion. "Don't tell your mother," Grandpa had whispered when the heat kicked back on, the radiators clanking with warmth. "She will use it as an excuse to say I can't afford to live here." "I won't tell her." I had promised. 2 years ago. A nor'easter ripped a section of shingles off the roof. The insurance deductible was $2,500. I paid it. Last year, the property insurance premium spiked. $1,800. I paid it. Weekly groceries. Roughly $200 a week for 3 years. That was over $30,000 just in food. I scrolled through the transactions, the screen blurring slightly. It was a long digital receipt of my love. I had subsidized his independence. I had bought him the dignity of staying in his own home until the very end. And my family. They knew. They had to know. They knew Grandpa didn't have that kind of cash. They just chose not to ask where the money was coming from because if they asked, they might have to offer to help. I remembered a rainy afternoon about 6 months before he died. We were sitting in the sunroom, watching the rain hammer against the glass. The gray light made him look frail, his skin like parchment paper. "Hazel," he had said suddenly, breaking the silence, "you are too good to them." I looked up from the book I was reading. "Who? Your parents, your sister. You give them too much of yourself." He turned his head slowly to look at me. "They are not like you. They don't love things. They love what things do for them. They love this house because it makes them look like landed gentry. They love you because you make their lives convenient. That is harsh, Grandpa, I had said gently. It is true, he snapped, his voice gaining a sudden, fierce strength. And when I am gone, they are going to show you exactly who they are. If they move fast, Hazel, you move smarter. If they move fast, I looked at the date on the deed again. They had sold the house 4 months after his funeral. That wasn't just fast. That was predatory. They had been stalling the will reading for weeks. Every time I asked about it, my father would sigh heavily into the phone and say, Hazel, please, we are still grieving. The lawyers are backed up. There is so much administrative paperwork to sort through. Why are you in such a rush? It is unseemly. Unseemly. While I was waiting out of respect, thinking they were drowning in grief, they were actually drowning in paperwork to transfer the title before the will could be executed. They knew. They must have known the will left the house to me. That was the only reason to rush. If the house was sold before the will was probated, the asset wouldn't exist anymore. It would just be cash. And cash is easy to hide, easy to spend, and very hard to claw back. I clicked on another tab in my bank statement. This time, I searched for transfers to family. The list that populated made bile rise in my throat. There was the loan to Sloan 2 years ago when she needed a new camera for her vlog, $3,000. Never repaid. There were the payments for the family cell phone plan. I had been paying for 4 lines for 5 years. That was nearly $10,000. There was the time Mom forgot her wallet when we were booking the family vacation rental, and I put it on my card. $4,000. I will Venmo you, she had said. She never did. I had been funding the enemy. I had been keeping them comfortable while they sharpened the knives to stab me in the back. I slammed the laptop shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty workshop. I couldn't stay here. The air in the shop suddenly felt too thick, too full of dust and lies. I grabbed my keys and walked out into the cool night air. I got into my truck, an old Ford that smelled like sawdust and peppermint. I didn't even have to think about where I was going. My hands just turned the wheel, guiding me toward the coast. The drive took 40 minutes. As I drove, the sky began to lighten. The deep indigo of night bled into a bruised purple, then a cold, steel gray. The trees along the highway were just silhouettes, rushing past me like ghosts. I turned onto Harbor View Lane. The road was gravel, winding through old oak trees draped in Spanish moss. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I rounded the final bend, and there it was, the house. It was a Victorian farmhouse, painted a soft, weathered yellow with white trim. The porch, the one I had fixed with Grandpa, wrapped around the front like a welcoming arm. The windows reflected the rising sun, burning with orange fire. It looked peaceful. It looked exactly the way it always had. I pulled the truck to a stop at the end of the driveway and killed the engine. Silence rushed in, filled only by the distant sound of the waves hitting the shore. I stepped out. The gravel crunched loudly under my boots. I walked up the driveway, my eyes scanning every inch of the structure. I looked for peeling paint. I looked for loose shingles. I looked for the things only I would notice. Then I saw it. Hanging on the beautiful hand-turned mahogany railing of the front porch was a gray metal box, a realtor's lockbox. It hung there like a tumor. It was ugly and industrial, clamping its metal jaws around the wood. Grandpa and I had sanded by hand. It was a slap in the face. It was a declaration of ownership. Sold. I walked up the steps, my boots heavy on the wood. I reached out and touched the lockbox. It was cold and wet with morning dew. My parents and Sloan had not just sold a building. They had sold the hours I spent scraping paint. They had sold the sound of Grandpa's laugh. They had sold the safety he tried to leave me. I stood there on the porch as the sun finally broke over the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn where Sloan used to pose. Grandpa had told me to move smarter. I gripped the cold metal of the lockbox until my knuckles turned white. "Okay, Grandpa," I whispered. "I'm listening." I turned my back on the house, walked down the steps, and got back into my truck. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had a lot of work to do. And the first step was to find out exactly how they had managed to sell a house that didn't belong to them. I stood on the porch, the morning sun hitting the back of my neck, and stared at the front door. The lockbox was an insult, but the door handle was the real problem. It was new. It was a brushed nickel lever, the kind you buy in a contractor pack at a big box store for $20. It replaced the heavy, antique brass thumb latch set that Grandpa and I had taken apart and oiled just last spring. That old latch had been on the door since 1920. It had a specific weight to it, a mechanical clunk that felt like a handshake. This new handle felt hollow. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keyring. I knew, logically, that it would not work. You do not change the hardware and keep the same cylinder, but grief makes you do irrational things. It makes you test physics just to be sure. I slid the old brass key toward the new keyhole. It didn't even fit into the slot. The grooves were all wrong. I stood there, scraping metal against metal, a quiet scratching sound that seemed deafening in the morning stillness. I was locked out, the house that held my entire history, the place where I had learned to walk, to sand wood, to be a person, was now a fortress I couldn't breach. Hazel. The voice came from the hydrangea bushes to my left. I jumped, dropping the useless key. It clattered on the porch floorboards. Mrs. Higgins was standing at the edge of the property line, holding a pair of garden shears. She was 70 years old, wearing a sun hat the size of a satellite dish. She had lived next door to Grandpa for 40 years. She knew everything that happened on this street before the streetlights even came on. "I didn't think I would see you here," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She walked closer, stepping over the low stone wall that separated our yards. "I saw the trucks yesterday." "Trucks?" I asked, my voice sounding rusty. "Moving trucks," she said. She looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "And that realtor, that man with the teeth, they were here all week. Hazel, showing the place. I saw your mother letting people in and out last Tuesday. I waved, but she pretended she was on her phone." My stomach tightened. "Last Tuesday." "Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday." Mrs. Higgins confirmed. She looked at the lockbox, then back at me. Her eyes softened with pity, which was almost worse than the anger. "I assumed you knew. I thought maybe you all decided it was too much work to keep. But seeing your face right now, Lord have mercy." "I didn't know," I said. The words tasted like ash. "I didn't know anything." Mrs. Higgins shook her head, looking at the house with genuine sadness. "They took the furniture. Hazel, the moving truck came on Friday. Your sister was directing them. I saw them load up that big oak sideboard your grandfather loved." The sideboard. The one Grandpa kept his war medals in. The one we had polished together every Christmas. "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins," I said. I bent down and picked up my key. I couldn't look at her. If I looked at her kindness, I would break, and I needed to stay angry. "I have to go." I walked back to my truck, my legs moving mechanically. I didn't go home. I drove straight to a diner on the edge of town, one where I knew the Wi-Fi was fast and the coffee was strong. I sat in a back booth, opened my laptop, and logged back into the county registry. I needed to understand the mechanics of the theft. The alert I had seen last night told me the house was sold to Brackenton Redevelopment. But you cannot just sell a house you do not own. Title law is rigid. There is a chain of custody, an ironclad sequence of ownership, for Brackenton to buy it. My parents had to own it first. I pulled up the property history. I paid the $5 fee for the detailed view of all documents recorded in the last 30 days. The screen refreshed, and there it was, the missing link, recorded 2 days ago. Just 24 hours before the sale to Brackenton was a document titled Quitclaim Deed. I clicked the PDF icon. The document opened. Grantor Elliot Langford, grantee Cynthia Lawson and Gordon Lawson. Consideration $1. I stared at the screen, the room around me. The clatter of plates, the smell of bacon, the murmur of conversation faded into a buzzing white noise. A quitclaim deed transfers ownership from one person to another with no guarantees. usually between family members. It is the fastest, dirtiest way to move property. But for this to be valid, Grandpa had to sign it. I scrolled down to the signature block. There was a signature. Elliot Langford. It was shaky. It looked, superficially, like his handwriting. But as I zoomed in, pixel by pixel, the rage in my chest turned into ice. Grandpa had Parkinson's. His signature in the last year of his life was a distinctive, jagged scrawl. It had a rhythm to it, a specific tremor. This signature on the screen was too fluid in the curves, too hesitant in the straight lines. It looked like someone trying to draw a picture of his signature, rather than the man himself writing it. But the date next to the signature was what made me slam my fist onto the table, making the silverware jump. The deed was dated 6 months ago. They were claiming Grandpa signed the house over to them half a year before he died, and they just forgot to record it until the week they decided to sell. Liar, I hissed under my breath. Grandpa would never have done this. He knew my parents. He knew my father had gambled away 2 businesses. He knew my mother viewed real estate as a liquid asset to be drained for vacations and cars. That was why he wrote the will. That was why he told me, explicitly, I am leaving it to you. I grabbed my phone. My thumb hovered over my mother's name. I shouldn't call. I knew I shouldn't. But the image of that fake signature was burning a hole in my brain. I hit dial. She answered on the second ring. Hazel, I am literally just walking into a brunch. Can this wait? Her voice was light, airy, completely unburdened by conscience. You sold the house, I said. I didn't scream. I kept my voice low, flat, and hard. There was a pause on the line. I could hear the background noise of a restaurant clinking glass, chatter, then a heavy sigh. Oh, for heaven's sake, Cynthia said. Did Marlene open her big mouth? I told her not to post anything. You changed the locks, I said. You sold Grandpa's house. You forged a deed. Excuse me. Her tone sharpened instantly. Watch your tone, young lady. Nobody forged anything. Dad signed that paper months ago. He wanted us to handle his affairs because he knew he was getting well. He was losing his grip. Hazel, he knew you couldn't handle the financial burden of that place. He told me he was leaving it to me, I said. He told me that to my face. He was confused, she said dismissively. Towards the end, he told people all sorts of things. He told the mailman he invented the toaster. You can't rely on the ramblings of a sick old man. We have the paperwork. Hazel. It is legal. It is handled. The house is sold. The money is in the estate account well. Some of it, and we are moving on. You sold it to a developer, I said. They are going to tear it down. It is a tear down. Hazel, she snapped. It is full of rot. It is a money pit. We got an excellent price. And honestly, you should be thanking us. Now you don't have to deal with the taxes. We did you a favor. A favor, I repeated. Look, I have to go. Gordon is waving me over. Don't make this ugly. Hazel, the will reading is at 2:00. Just show up, sign the papers, and let's be a family again. Stop being so dramatic. The line clicked dead. I stared at the phone. My hand was shaking. Not from sadness, from adrenaline. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. They truly believed that if they just said, it's handled enough times, reality would bend to their will. A text message popped up at the top of my screen. It was from Sloan. Stop harassing Mom. You didn't earn a whole house just because you drove him to the doctor a few times. Grandpa was confused at the end. We are just doing what he would have wanted if he was lucid. Get over it. I didn't reply. I saved the text. I took a screenshot. I added it to a folder on my phone labeled Evidence. I closed my laptop and paid my bill. I had 4 hours until the will reading. I spent those 4 hours driving. I drove to the nursing home where Grandpa had refused to go. I drove past the cemetery. I drove until the engine heat warmed the floorboards of the truck. I needed to be calm. I needed to walk into that lawyer's office not as the grieving granddaughter, but as a stone wall they couldn't break. The law office of Henderson Vance was located in a brick building downtown. It smelled of old paper and leather polish. When I walked in at 1:55, the receptionist looked up with a start, as if she had been warned I might come in swinging a hammer. "Miss Lawson," she squeaked. "They are already in the conference room." "The meeting is at 2, I said, checking my watch. "Yes. Well, your parents arrived early. Mr. Henderson decided to start the preliminaries." Of course they did. They were controlling the narrative before I even stepped in the room. I walked past her and pushed open the heavy oak doors of the conference room. The room went silent. My mother was sitting at the far end, reapplying her lipstick. My father was scrolling on his tablet. Sloane was absent, probably too busy working on her tan. Mr. Henderson sat at the head of the table. He was a small, nervous man who had been Grandpa's attorney for 20 years. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. He was sweating, despite the aggressive air conditioning. "Hazel," my father said, not looking up from his screen. "Nice of you to join us." "I am on time," I said, taking the empty chair opposite them. I didn't look at my parents. I looked straight at the lawyer. "Read it." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He shuffled the papers in front of him. "Yes, well, as I was explaining to your parents, Hazel, this is a standard last will and testament. However, given the recent developments, some of the clauses are now moot." "Read the clause about the house," I said. My mother sighed loudly. "Hazel, we already told you." "Read it," I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a blade in it that made Mr. Henderson jump. He looked down at the document. "Article 4. I give, devise, and bequeath my real property located at 420 Harbor View Lane, Port Mason, Virginia, to my granddaughter, Hazel Marie Lawson, absolutely and in fee simple." The words hung in the air. "There," I said. "It is mine." "Was," my father corrected. He finally put down his tablet and looked at me with a bored expression. "It was his to give, but since he transferred the title to us before he died, that clause is invalid. It is what the lawyers call, what is it? Henderson. Ademption." "Mr. Henderson whispered. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Ademption by extinction. The specific asset devised in the will was no longer in the testator's estate at the time of death. Therefore, the gift fails." "Exactly," my mother said. She closed her compact with a snap. "The house wasn't his when he died. Hazel, he gave it to us. The will can't give you something he didn't own. It is simple logic." I looked at Mr. Henderson. "You drafted this will. You knew what he wanted. Did he ever mention transferring the house to them?" Mr. Henderson shifted in his seat. He tugged at his collar. "Elliot, Mr. Langford was very clear about his intentions when we wrote this. However, I was not involved in the drafting of the quitclaim deed your parents presented." "Presented?" I repeated. "You mean the one they recorded yesterday, 6 months after the date on the paper?" "It is perfectly legal to record a deed later," my father said, his voice dropping an octave, a warning tone. "Happens all the time. Look, Hazel, there is some cash in the residual estate, a few $1,000s. You will get your share of that. But the house is done. It is sold. The money from the sale is ours, because the house was ours. End of story." Mr. Henderson looked miserable. "Technically, based on the documents currently on record, your father is correct. The asset was removed from the estate." My mother stood up, smoothing her skirt. "See? I told you it was handled. Now, Gordon, we need to get to the bank before it closes. We have that wire coming in from the developer." They didn't even wait for me to stand. They swept out of the room like royalty leaving a boring peasant audience. My father clapped Mr. Henderson on the shoulder as he passed. "Good work. Henderson, send us the bill." The door swung shut, leaving me alone with the lawyer. The silence stretched. I watched Mr. Henderson pack his briefcase. His hands were shaking slightly. "He didn't sign that deed," I said quietly. Mr. Henderson froze. He didn't look up. Hazel proving that it is a very difficult, very expensive road. Your parents have resources. They have the sale proceeds now. You would be fighting a war of attrition. "He didn't sign it," I said again. Mr. Henderson finished packing his bag. He stood up and walked around the table. He paused next to my chair. "Your grandfather was a good man," he said softly. He was very specific about what he wanted. He was worried. About exactly this. I looked up at him. "Then why are you letting them do this?" "I can only work with the documents presented to me as the executor's counsel," he said, reciting the legal line. But then, he did something strange. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small, plain white business card. There was no logo on it, just a name and a number. He slid it across the polished mahogany table until it rested under my hand. "However," he murmured, his voice barely audible, "I am not the only person Elliot talked to, and I am certainly not the only lawyer in Virginia who hates seeing a good man's wishes trampled by greed." I looked at the card. It wasn't his name. It was a name I didn't recognize. Arthur Sterling. "Esca, who is this?" I asked. Mr. Henderson glanced at the door to make sure it was fully closed. "Call him. From somewhere private. Not your house. Not your cell phone if you are on a family plan. Do it today." He straightened up and adjusted his tie, his face returning to a mask of professional neutrality. "I am sorry for your loss, Miss Lawson. Please close the door on your way out." I sat there for a long time after he left, my fingers tracing the edge of the card. My family thought the game was over. They thought they had flipped the board and walked away with the prize. But as I looked at that card, I realized something. Grandpa hadn't just left me a house. He had left me a strategy. I picked up the card, put it in my pocket, and walked out. I had a phone call to make. I sat in the cab of my truck in the parking lot of the law office, the engine idling just enough to keep the air conditioning breathing cold air against my face. The meeting with Mr. Henderson had lasted less than 20 minutes, but it felt like I had aged 5 years. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the white business card. Arthur Sterling. I placed it on the dashboard, right next to the compass Grandpa had glued there years ago. I was not ready to make that call yet. I needed to clear the deck first. My family thought they had won. They thought that by selling the house and seizing the cash, they had cut me out of the equation. But they had forgotten something fundamental about the way our family worked. They were the show ponies. I was the stable hand. They were the ones who ate the dinner. I was the one who bought the groceries. For a long time, I had told myself it was just what you did for family. You helped out. You pitched in. But as I sat there, staring at the gray pavement, I realized it hadn't been help. It had been tribute. I picked up my phone. I didn't dial. Instead, I opened my voicemail archive. I needed to hear it. I needed to remind myself that the people who just smirked at me across a mahogany table were the same people who had been bleeding me dry for a decade. I scrolled back to a message from 3 months ago. I pressed play. "Hazel, it is Mom." Cynthia's voice chirped through the speakers. "Listen, I am at the checkout at Whole Foods, and my card is doing that weird thing again. I need you to transfer $300 to my account right now." I have a line behind me. "Don't make me wait." There was no please. There was no thank you. Just the expectation of service. I played another one. This one was from Sloan. 6 months ago. "Hey. So, my laptop crashed and I literally cannot edit my vlog. I am at the Apple store. I put it on the emergency card you gave Dad. It was like $2,000. I will pay you back when my brand deal hits next month. Kisses." She never paid me back. The brand deal. Money went to a trip to Tulum. I played one more. My father. 2 years ago. "Hazel, I am switching banks and the transfers are frozen for a few days. Put the family phone plan on your card for this month. I will sort it out next billing cycle." Next billing cycle. That was 2 years ago. I stopped the playback. The silence that filled the truck was heavy. But it wasn't sad anymore. It was the silence of a judge who has heard enough testimony. "Okay," I said to the empty truck. "You want to be independent? Let's see how independent you are." I opened the browser on my phone. My fingers were steady. The shaking from the lawyer's office was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical precision. I felt like a surgeon stepping up to the table to amputate a gangrenous limb. First, the phone plan. I logged into the carrier account. I had been the account holder since that day Dad switched banks. I navigated to the line management screen. Line 1, Dad, iPhone 15 Pro Max. Leased, monthly cost, $85 plus insurance. Line 2, Mom, iPhone 15 Plus, leased, monthly cost $75. Line 3, Sloan, iPhone 15 Pro, leased, monthly cost $90 plus an exorbitant international data package she refused to turn off. I selected all 3 lines. The website popped up a warning box. Are you sure you want to suspend service? This will immediately disconnect these devices from the network. I didn't hesitate. I didn't blink. I tapped confirm. The screen refreshed. Suspended. It was a small action. Just a few pixels changing color on a screen. But the satisfaction was visceral. It felt like cutting a heavy rope that had been tied around my waist. Next, the streaming services. I opened my password manager. It was a graveyard of shared logins: Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Disney Plus, Spotify Premium Family. I went through them one by one. I didn't just cancel the subscriptions. That would let them finish out the month. I went into the settings. I clicked sign out of all devices. Then I changed the password to a random string of 20 characters that looked like someone had smashed their face against a keyboard. Then I removed my credit card information. Click, click, click. I imagined the screens going black in their respective living rooms. I imagined the music stopping mid-song. It was petty, maybe, but they had sold my grandfather's house for parts. I was just returning the favor. Next, the delivery services. My mother had an Instacart account that was permanently logged in on her iPad. It was linked to my Chase Sapphire card. She used it for small essentials, which usually meant $60 bottles of wine and imported cheese. I logged in. I went to payment methods. I deleted the card. Then I went to Amazon. Sloan used my Prime account because she said paying for shipping was a scam. I went to the Manage Your Content and Devices page. I saw her iPad, her laptop, her phone. Deregister, deregister, deregister. Finally, the big one, the emergency credit card. It was an American Express Gold card. I had added my father as an authorized user 5 years ago when he claimed his wallet was stolen in Europe. He had never returned the card. He called it the safety net. I opened the Amex app. I looked at the recent charges. The oarsman. Last night, $840. They had paid for their victory dinner with my credit card. The air in the truck seemed to vanish. I stared at the numbers. They had celebrated stealing my inheritance by buying champagne on my dime. The rage that surged through me then was white hot. But I didn't let it explode. I channeled it. I compressed it into the tip of my finger. I tapped Manage Card Members. I selected Gordon Lawson. I tapped Remove Card Member. Are you sure? The app asked. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, I whispered. I confirmed the removal. Then, just to be safe, I reported my own card as compromised and requested a new number that would kill any recurring charges they had set up on the main account. I put the phone down on the center console. I took a deep breath. It was done. I had just severed every financial artery connecting me to them. It had taken less than 10 minutes to undo 10 years of exploitation. I waited. It didn't take long. The first text came in 3 minutes later. It was Sloan. Hey, did you change the Netflix password? I'm trying to watch my show and it kicked me out. I didn't reply. 2 minutes later, another text from Sloan. Spotify isn't working either. Whatever you're doing, stop it. It is annoying. Then, the first call. It was my mother. I watched her name flash on the screen. Mom's cell. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. Then, a text from her. Hazel, I am trying to order groceries and it says the payment method is invalid. Did you cancel the card? Put it back on. I have guests coming over tonight. I stared at the messages. The entitlement was breathtaking. They had just told me to my face that I was worth nothing to them, that my grandfather's wishes meant nothing, and yet they still expected the groceries to show up. They thought we could compartmentalize this. They thought they could rob me with one hand and take handouts with the other. My phone started buzzing continuously now, a flood of confusion and irritation. Sloan, my data just cut out. I am on Wi-Fi, but I can't make calls. Hazel, Mom. Pick up the phone. This is ridiculous. Sloan, OMG, did you cut the phone lines? Are you insane? I have a brand call in an hour. Then, the phone rang again. This time, the caller ID said Dad's cell, but I had just cut his service. He must be calling from a landline or Wi-Fi calling. I debated ignoring it, but I needed them to know. I needed them to understand that the ATM was closed. I swiped green and put it on speaker. What do you think you are doing? My father's voice was low, filled with that controlled menace he used to intimidate waiters and junior employees. It was the voice that usually made me apologize. I am balancing my books, I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how calm I sounded. You cut the phones, he said, and the credit card. The waiter at the club just brought back the card. Declined. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? I have colleagues here. Hazel. That sounds uncomfortable, I said. Turn it back on, he commanded. Right now. You are acting like a petulant child. We will discuss the house later, but you do not humiliate this family in public. The family didn't pay the bill, I said. I did? I told you I would pay you back, he shouted, his composure cracking. You said that 2 years ago, I replied. You also said the house was a burden. You said you did me a favor, so I am returning the favor. I am removing the burden of my financial support from you. You have the house money now. Dad, you have hundreds of thousands of dollars. Surely you can buy your own iPhone plan. This is petty, he spat. You are being vindictive because you lost. I didn't lose, I said. I woke up. If you don't turn these services back on by 5 o'clock, he threatened, there will be consequences. You are part of this family. Hazel, whether you like it or not, you have obligations. My only obligation was to Grandpa, I said. And you stole that from me. Do not call me again. I hung up. My heart was pounding in my ears. A fast, rhythmic thumping. My hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of finally standing up. I had said no. I had actually said no. The phone lit up again immediately. A text from Dad. You are making a huge mistake. We will remember this. I didn't delete the text. I didn't block the number. Instead, I took a screenshot. I opened a new album in my photo gallery. I named it Case File. I screenshotted the text from Sloan demanding passwords. I screenshotted the text from Mom demanding groceries. I screenshotted the notification from Amex showing the dinner charge. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting a family squabble. I was gathering evidence. These weren't just messages. They were proof of financial coercion. They were proof of a pattern of dependency and exploitation that would paint a very different picture than the caring family narrative they were trying to spin. They wanted to play legal hardball, fine. I would build a dossier. I sat there for another moment, letting the silence settle back into the truck. The sun was high now, glaring off the hood. I felt lighter. The heavy weight of their expectations, which I had carried like a backpack full of stones for my entire adult life, was gone. I looked at the dashboard. The white business card was still sitting there. Arthur Sterling. Mr. Henderson had been terrified to give me that card. He had acted like he was passing me a grenade. I picked it up. The cardstock was thick, expensive. There was no address, just a phone number and the name. Call me from somewhere private, Henderson had said. Today, I looked at my phone. I had cut their strings. I was free. But being free wasn't enough. I needed to be effective. I punched in the number. It rang once, twice. This is Sterling, a voice answered. It was a deep voice, smooth and sharp, like aged whiskey and broken glass. Mr. Sterling, I said. My name is Hazel Lawson. Mr. Henderson gave me your card. There was a pause on the other end, a long, deliberate silence that made me hold my breath. Hazel, he said finally. The way he said my name sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation. I have been waiting for your call. I assumed it would take you a few days to get tired of their nonsense. I am glad to see you are faster than that. They sold the house, I said. They forged a deed. I know, Sterling said. We expected they might try the blunt force approach. Amateurs usually do. I asked. Your grandfather and I. Sterling replied, Elliot was a man who believed in redundant systems. He knew that if he left you the house in the will, they would try to break the will. So he left you something else. What did he leave me? I asked, gripping the steering wheel. He left you the weapon to destroy them. Sterling said, Are you near a fax machine? Or better yet, can you meet me at the marina in 40 minutes? Slip C4? Come alone. I will be there, I said. Good, Sterling said. And Hazel. Don't sign anything. Not a birthday card, not a delivery receipt, not a parking ticket. Until you talk to me, your signature is the most dangerous thing you own. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. A weapon. Grandpa had left me a weapon. I put the truck in gear. The tires squealed slightly on the hot asphalt as I pulled out of the parking lot. My family was busy panicking about their Netflix passwords and their declined credit cards. They were distracted. They had no idea that I was on my way to pick up the ammunition that would end the war they started. I pulled my truck up to the loading dock of Sable and Stone Restoration, my tires crunching over the gravel. I had 40 minutes before I needed to be at the marina to meet Arthur Sterling, but I needed to print the screenshots I had just taken. I needed hard copies. Digital files could be deleted, passwords could be reset, but a piece of paper in a manila folder was something tangible. I unlocked the heavy steel door of the workshop and stepped into the cool, sawdust-scented air. I didn't even have time to turn on the main overhead lights before a shadow detached itself from the wall near the office. I flinched, my hand instinctively going to the heavy brass calmness of the padlock I was holding. Don't hit me, a voice rasped. I am just here to talk. It was Aunt Marlene. She was still wearing the outfit from the brunch, a loud, floral caftan that looked like a garden exploded, but the festive energy was gone. She looked deflated. She was sitting on a stack of reclaimed heart pine beams, smoking a cigarette inside my workshop, which was a fire hazard that would usually make me scream. Get out, I said, walking past her toward the office. I am not in the mood for the B team. Marlene, go help Mom spend the money. I didn't mean to stream it, she said, hurrying after me. Her heels clicked frantically on the concrete floor. I thought I was recording a video to send to my bridge group. I didn't know I was live until the comments started popping up. You did me a favor, I said, throwing my bag onto my desk and waking up the printer. If you hadn't streamed it, I wouldn't have known to lock down my accounts until my credit score was 0. So, thanks. Now leave. I saw the papers. Hazel, she said. Her voice was different. It wasn't the tipsy, gossiping tone she used at family gatherings. It was sharp. It was sober. I stopped typing and turned to look at her. What? Marlene took a drag of her cigarette, then stubbed it out in a coffee mug on my desk. She adjusted her glasses, and for the first time in my life, I remembered what Aunt Marlene actually did before she retired to a life of cruises and day drinking. She wasn't just the family flake. For 30 years, Marlene had been a senior auditor for a commercial escrow firm in Richmond. She had spent 3 decades looking for missing money. I was sitting right next to Sharp, she said, leaning against the doorframe. The realtor. When he opened that folder on the table, I saw the deed, the one they were celebrating. The quitclaim, I said. The one Grandpa supposedly signed 6 months ago. Supposedly, Marlene corrected. I saw the signature. Hazel, I have looked at thousands of signatures. I have seen forged ones, coerced ones, shaky ones, and drunk ones. That signature on the table. It was too clean. What do you mean? I mean it didn't have the drag, she said, her hands moving in the air to mimic a pen stroke. When an old man with Parkinson's writes, the pen drags. There are micro-pauses in the ink flow because the hand tremors. That signature was smooth, continuous, and the ink density was perfectly even. She looked me dead in the eye. It looked like someone traced a projection, or worse, copied a digital scan onto the paper. My heart gave a hard thump. I saw it on the county website. It looked wrong. "Pull it up," she ordered, pointing at my monitor. Big screen, high contrast. I hesitated for a second, then sat down and pulled up the document again. I zoomed in on the signature block. Marlene leaned over my shoulder, smelling of expensive perfume and stale tobacco. "There," she said, tapping the screen with a manicured fingernail. "Look at the tail of the D in Langford. See that tiny hook? Your grandfather never hooked his Ds. He trailed them off. And look at the line quality. It is pixelated at the edges. That is not pen on paper. Hazel, that is a high-resolution print job." "But it is recorded," I said. The county clerk accepted it. Marlene let out a short, bark-like laugh. "Honey, the county clerk is a minimum wage employee who checks to see if the margins are 1 inch and if the notary stamp is visible. They don't verify authenticity. You could walk in there with a deed signed by Mickey Mouse, and if the notary seal looks real, they will record it. The registry is a repository, not a detective agency. Your parents know that." "They forged it," I whispered. "They actually forged it." "They were desperate," Marlene said. "You don't do a sloppy cut-and-paste job like that unless you are on a clock. Who is the buyer?" "Brackenton Redevelopment Group," I said. Marlene frowned. "Never heard of them, and I know every developer from here to D.C. Who is the title company?" I scrolled down to the bottom of the document. "Swift River Title and Escrow." Marlene's eyebrows shot up. "Swift River, that is a strip mall operation out in West Virginia. It is 2 hours away. Why would they use a title company 2 hours away when there are 10 of them in Port Mason?" "Because the local ones knew Grandpa." I realized. If they walked into a local office with a deed signed by Elliot Langford 6 months ago, the escrow officer would have said, "Hey, I saw Elliot last week. He didn't mention this." They needed a stranger, someone who just wanted the closing fees. "Exactly," Marlene said. "Swift River is a volume shop. They are known for speed closings. They don't ask questions. They just process the wire transfers. Your parents didn't just sell the house, Hazel. They laundered it." She walked over to the window and looked out at the parking lot, her expression grim. "I asked Cynthia about it at dinner, quietly. I asked her why the rush. She told me to shut up and drink my champagne. But I saw her hands. She was shaking. They are in trouble. Hazel, real trouble. You don't commit a felony like this unless the wolves are already at the door." I thought about the desperate texts for money, the declined credit cards, the loans that were never repaid. It made sense. They weren't just greedy. They were broke. The house wasn't an inheritance to them. It was a lifeboat. "It doesn't matter," I said, feeling a wave of exhaustion. "The deed is recorded. The money is wired. The house is sold. Even if I prove it is a forgery, it will take years in court. By the time I win, the house will be demolished and the money will be spent." Marlene turned back to me. A slow, sly smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a woman who just found the error that invalidates the entire audit. "You are assuming they were smart enough to check the history," she said. "What history?" "The chain of title," Marlene said. "Amateurs look at the last deed. Pros look at the whole book." She nudged me aside and took control of the mouse. "Your grandfather was a stubborn old mule, Hazel, but he was paranoid. He hated the idea of the government taking his money, and he hated the idea of your father taking his house even more. He asked me for advice 3 years ago." My eyes widened. He asked me how to make sure a property transfer happened automatically upon death, without going through probate, and without anyone being able to stop it." Marlene said. Her fingers clicked rapidly on the keyboard. "I told him about a life estate deed." She typed into the search bar. Instead of searching for documents from the last month, she set the date range back 2 years. "A life estate deed," she explained as the search wheel spun. Splits the ownership of a house into 2 time periods. The life tenant that was Grandpa owns the right to live there until the moment he dies. The remainder man owns the future interest. The search results populated. There was only one document. Deed of gift. Life estate with remainder interest. Grantor Elliot Langford. Grantee Hazel Marie Lawson. Date recorded 2 years ago. I stared at the screen. The room seemed to tilt. He did it, I breathed. He sure did, Marlene said, pointing at the screen. Look at that. Recorded, stamped, and finalized 2 years before he died. This document says that the moment Elliot Langford's heart stopped beating, full ownership of 420 Harbor View Lane transferred instantly and automatically to Hazel Lawson. She stood up and crossed her arms. It happens by operation of law. It doesn't go through the will. It doesn't go through the estate. Your parents could have forged 1,000 quitclaim deeds dated 6 months ago. It doesn't matter, because the second Grandpa died, their claim fake or not evaporated. You cannot sell what you do not own, and as of 4 months ago, that house was 100% yours. I looked at the document. It was real. Grandpa's signature was there stronger then, less shaky. And there was my name, Hazel Marie Lawson. They didn't see this, I said. How did they not see this? Because they are lazy, Marlene said with disdain. They only checked the current deed to see if it was clear. They didn't run a full title search because they were trying to save money on the closing costs and Swift River title. They probably just glanced at the tax record and moved on. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a hysterical, jagged thing. They sold my house, I said. But they didn't actually sell it. They just took money from a developer in exchange for nothing. Oh, it is worse than nothing, Marlene said, her eyes gleaming. They committed title fraud. They sold a property that had already legally transferred to you. That means the sale to Brackenton is void. Void ab initio. From the beginning, Brackenton doesn't own the house. You do. And the money, I asked. The money they spent. The money they are wiring to their offshore accounts or paying off their debts with. Marlene grimaced. That is now proceeds from a criminal enterprise. And when Brackenton finds out they paid $2 million for a house the sellers didn't own, they are going to want that money back. Today, I looked at the clock. I had 20 minutes to get to the marina. Why are you telling me this? I asked Marlene. You are one of them. You were drinking the champagne. Marlene picked up her purse. She looked at me, and for a second, she looked old and tired. I like champagne, Hazel, and I like expensive dinners, but I sat on that porch with your grandfather for 40 years. He was the only decent man in this entire gene pool. She paused at the door. And besides, Cynthia made a crack about my weight during the appetizers. I hope you bury them. She walked out into the sunlight, leaving me alone with the smoking gun on my computer screen. I didn't just have a case file anymore. I had a nuclear launch code. My parents hadn't just betrayed me. They had walked into a trap that Grandpa had set 2 years ago, and they had sprung it on themselves with spectacular stupidity. I hit print, the machine whirred to life, spitting out the life estate deed. I grabbed it, still warm from the fuser. I had the weapon. Now I just needed the general. I grabbed my keys and ran for the truck. Arthur Sterling was waiting. I had been back at the workshop for less than an hour when they arrived. I knew they were coming. The sudden blackout of their digital lives, the suspended phone lines, the canceled streaming accounts, the declined credit cards, was a beacon I had lit specifically to draw them in. I was no longer the prey running for cover. I was the hunter waiting in the blind. I was sitting at the large assembly table in the center of the restoration studio, slowly polishing the brass hardware of an 18th century sea chest. The repetitive motion was grounding. Forward, back, polish, buff. The smell of Brasso was sharp and clean, cutting through the humid afternoon air. The front door of Sable and Stone Restoration did not just open, it exploded inward. The bell above the door jangled violently, a sound that usually announced a delivery or a client, but today signaled an invasion. My father led the charge. his face a mottled red that clashed with his navy blazer. My mother was right behind him, her heels clicking like gunshots on the concrete floor, clutching a leather portfolio as if it were a shield. And trailing them was Sloane, looking up from a phone that was presumably only working on Wi-Fi now, her expression a mix of boredom and fury. They marched toward me like a tribunal. They did not look at the antique furniture surrounding them. They did not see the craftsmanship. They only saw the woman who had dared to cut off the supply line. "You," my father boomed, his voice echoing off the high tin ceiling. "You have lost your mind." I didn't stand up. I didn't stop polishing the brass handle. I kept my rhythm steady, my eyes focused on the metal. "Hello, Dad, Mom, Sloane, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Cut the crap, Hazel," Sloane snapped, stepping around our father to glare at me. "My data is dead. Do you know how much engagement I'm losing right now? I have a sponsored story due at 5 o'clock. Turn it back on." "No," I said simply. I dipped my rag into the polish tin. "We are not here to discuss the phones," my mother interrupted, her voice tight and breathless. She placed the leather portfolio on the table, right on top of a delicate inlay I was repairing. I reached out and calmly moved her folder to the raw wood surface of the table. "Then why are you here?" I asked. "Because the last time we spoke, you told me the house was handled and I should stop being dramatic." My father planted his hands on the table, leaning in until I could smell the scotch on his breath. It was 3 in the afternoon. "It is handled, but there is a clerical hiccup, a formality." "A formality," I repeated. "The title company," Cynthia said, forcing a smile that looked painful. "They are just being fastidious, because Grandpa's affairs were so messy toward the end. They want to make sure the file is bulletproof, to protect the buyer. Of course." She unzipped the portfolio and pulled out a single, crisp document. She slid it toward me. "We just need you to sign this," she said. "It is a standard quitclaim deed. It just says that you have no interest in the property. It clears up any potential confusion about the will. Just a signature. Hazel, then we can turn your little phone prank off and go back to being a family." I looked at the paper. It was a quitclaim deed, transferring any and all interest I might have in the property to Brackenton Redevelopment Group. They were trying to cover their tracks. They must have realized, or perhaps the buyer's lawyers had realized, that the 6-month-old deed looked suspicious. They needed my signature to validate the chain of title retroactively. If I signed this, I would be agreeing that I had no claim. I would be legalizing their theft. "You want me to sign away a house you already sold?" I asked, looking up at my father. "We are doing this for you," he said, his voice dropping to that patronizing tone he used when he was lying. "The buyer is getting nervous about the will. If they pull out, Hazel, the deal collapses. And if the deal collapses, there is no money for anyone. No money for the estate. No money for your little inheritance share." "I don't care about the money," I said. "Oh, grow up," Sloane groaned. She hopped up onto a workbench, swinging her legs. "Everyone cares about money. You are just being difficult because you are jealous. You are mad because we actually made something happen. You didn't even know how to monetize Grandpa properly. You just let him rot in that big house for free." My hand stopped moving on the brass. "Monetize Grandpa properly," I said slowly. The words felt like gravel in my mouth. "Yes," Sloane said, rolling her eyes. "I could have turned that house into a content goldmine years ago. Vintage aesthetic cottagecore vibes. We could have rented it out for shoots. But no, you wanted to keep it like a museum for a senile old man. And now that we are finally liquidating a dead asset, you are sabotaging us." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the vacuous hunger in her eyes. She didn't see a grandfather. She saw a prop. "So," I said, turning back to my parents, "let me get this straight. You sold the house, you took the money, but now you need my signature. Which means you sold a house you weren't sure you actually owned." "We owned it," my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The tools rattled. "He signed it to us." But the paperwork it is complex. We are just simplifying it. Sign the damn paper, Hazel. And if I don't, then we will drag you to court, he spat. We have witnesses who will testify that Dad was lucid when he signed that deed to us. We have the notary. We have the money to bury you in legal fees until you are living in your truck. Do you really want to fight us? You are a carpenter. Hazel, we are the Lawsons. The Lawsons, I said. Right. I stood up. I walked over to my desk. They watched me, expecting me to pick up a pen. They thought I was folding. They thought the threat of their social status and their imaginary wealth was enough to crush me. I picked up a manila folder. I walked back to the table. You mentioned documents, I said. I have some documents too. I opened the folder and slid the first sheet across the table. It was the printout of the quitclaim deed they had recorded yesterday, the one with the forged signature. This is what you recorded, I said. Grantor Elliot Langford, date 6 months ago. Signature questionable. That is authentic, my mother snapped, though her eyes darted away. Sure, I said. But here is the problem. I slid the second document across the table, the one Aunt Marlene and I had found, the one Arthur Sterling had told me to keep safe like a loaded gun. Grantor Elliot Langford, I read aloud. Grantee Hazel Marie Lawson, type life estate deed with remainder interest, date recorded 2 years ago. I watched them. I watched the color drain from my mother's face. It didn't happen all at once. It started at her lips and spread upward, leaving her looking gray and waxy. She knew what a life estate was. Her father was a real estate attorney. She knew exactly what those words meant. What is that? Sloane asked, hopping down from the bench. What does that mean? It means, I said, my voice steady and cold, that Grandpa didn't own the house when he died. He only owned the right to live there, the ownership of the actual building that transferred to me the second his heart stopped. I pointed at the forged deed my father was staring at. Which means that piece of paper you recorded yesterday, it is worthless. You can't sell what you don't own. Grandpa couldn't give it to you 6 months ago because he had already given it to me 2 years ago. That is a fake, my father whispered, but his hands were shaking. He reached for the paper, but I slapped my hand down on it. It is a certified copy from the county clerk, I said. And I have the original in a safe deposit box, and Arthur Sterling has a copy, and the alert system sent a notification to my email. Arthur Sterling. My mother choked out the name. You hired Arthur Sterling. He is representing the true owner of the property, I said. Me? The silence in the room was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator in the corner sounded like a jet engine. You have to fix this, my mother hissed. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. Hazel, you have to sign the quitclaim, right now. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said, pulling my arm away. You got greedy. You thought I was stupid. You thought you could steal my inheritance and I would just cry about it. No, Sloane blurts out suddenly. Her face was pale, stripped of its usual influencer sheen. You don't get it. We needed the money by Friday. The room froze. My father spun around to look at Sloane, his eyes wide with panic. Sloane, shut up. He is going to kill us. Dad, Sloane screamed, her voice cracking. If the wire doesn't clear by Friday, the bridge loan defaults. They will take the condo. They will take the cars. I looked from Sloane to my father, a bridge loan. Suddenly, the pieces slammed into place. The rush, the speed-closing title company, the desperation. You didn't just sell the house, I said, realizing the depth of the hole they were in. You borrowed against the sale before it even closed. You took out a high-interest loan using the expected proceeds as collateral, and that loan is due on Friday. My father slumped against the table. He looked 20 years older than he had when he walked in. It was an investment opportunity, he muttered. A sure thing. We just needed liquidity to buy in. The house was sitting there doing nothing. So you gambled, I said. You gambled with my house. We were going to pay you a share, my mother pleaded. Tears were streaming down her face now, carving tracks through her foundation. Hazel, please, If that sale to Brackenton is voided, if they demand their money back, we don't have it. We already spent the deposit on the loan fees. If this falls apart, we lose everything, everything. She reached for my hand again. You are family. You can't let us lose everything. Just sign the paper. We can work something out later. We will pay you back. I promise. I looked at her hand. It was the same hand that had held a champagne glass last night while she toasted to my exclusion. It was the same hand that had never lifted a finger to help Grandpa when he was sick. Family, I said. The word tasted bitter. You are right. You are family. But Grandpa was family too. And you stole from him. You forged his signature. You lied about his wishes. You treated him like a wallet. I picked up the quitclaim deed they had brought for me to sign. I held it up. You want me to sign this? I asked. Yes, my mother breathed. Please, Hazel. I ripped the paper in half. Then I ripped it again. I let the pieces flutter down onto the concrete floor like confetti. No, I said. My father made a sound that was half growl, half sob. He took a step toward me. His fists clenched. You ungrateful little bitch. I will— You will what? I interrupted, my voice sharp as a whip. You will hit me in front of witnesses. I pointed to the security camera in the corner of the workshop. A small red light blinked steadily. That feeds directly to the cloud. I lied. It only recorded to a hard drive in the office. But they didn't know that. And Arthur Sterling has instructed me to document every interaction. Go ahead, Dad. Add assault to the list of felonies. We already have forgery, title fraud, and grand larceny. My father froze. He looked at the camera, then back at me. The fight went out of him. He looked small. Get out, I said. Hazel? My mother started. Get out, I yelled. It was the first time I had raised my voice. It felt good. It felt like breaking a window to let fresh air into a burning room. Get out of my workshop. Get out of my life. If you come back here, I will call the police. And I won't be calling them for a domestic dispute. I will be calling them to report a $2 million fraud. You are destroying this family, Sloane spat, tears running down her face. I hope you are happy with your rotting old house. I am, I said, because it is mine. They left. It wasn't the confident march they had entered with. It was a retreat. My father stumbled slightly at the door. My mother was sobbing openly. Sloane was typing frantically on her phone, probably trying to find a lawyer who worked for free, which she wouldn't find. I watched the door close behind them. The bell jangled one last time and then went silent. I stood there in the quiet workshop, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked down at the shredded pieces of the deed on the floor. They needed the money by Friday. Today was Wednesday. They had 48 hours before their world collapsed. I walked over to the table and picked up my polishing rag. I went back to the sea chest. I had work to do. And unlike them, I knew that you couldn't build a life on things you didn't earn. I dipped the rag in the polish. Friday, I whispered to myself. I would be ready. The marina was quiet, the water slapping gently against the fiberglass hulls of 100 expensive boats. I walked down the long wooden pier, the smell of salt and diesel fuel filling my nose. It was a stark contrast to the smell of sawdust and rage I had left behind in my workshop. I found Slip C4 easily. It wasn't a flashy yacht like the ones my parents drooled over. It was a converted trawler, wide-beamed and sturdy, painted a no-nonsense navy blue. The name on the stern was The Archivist. Arthur Sterling was sitting in a canvas chair on the aft deck, a file folder resting on his knees. He was an older man, perhaps in his 70s, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a white beard that was neatly trimmed. He didn't look like a high-powered attorney. He looked like a retired sea captain who read too many books. Permission to come aboard, I asked, my voice carrying over the water. Sterling looked up and smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. Hazel, he said, standing up to offer me a hand. Your grandfather said you had a good sense of timing. I would say you are right on schedule. I stepped onto the boat. The deck was solid beneath my boots. I wish he had been wrong, I said. I wish I could say they proved him baseless. Elliot was rarely wrong about human nature, Sterling said. He gestured to a second chair. Please, sit. Can I offer you some iced tea? It is a bit early for anything stronger, considering the work we have to do. Tea is fine, I said. He poured a glass from a pitcher on a small table and handed it to me. Then he sat down and tapped the folder on his lap. I assume you have seen the county records, he asked. I have, I said. And the forged quitclaim my parents tried to pass off as legitimate. They just left my shop. They are desperate. Mr. Sterling. They borrowed against the sale. The loan is due on Friday. Sterling nodded slowly, not looking surprised. A bridge loan. High risk. High interest. Classic behavior for people who are asset-rich and cash-poor. Or, in their case, people who think they are asset-rich. He opened the folder. Your grandfather came to me 3 years ago. He was heartbroken. Hazel, I want you to know that he wasn't angry. He was just resigned. He told me that every time your mother or sister visited, he had to check his wallet afterwards. He told me they talked about his house like it was already listed on Zillow. I looked out at the water, blinking back the sudden sting of tears. He told me they loved what things did for them, not the things themselves. He was right, Sterling said. So, we built a fortress. The life estate deed you found, that was the outer wall. We recorded it quietly. We didn't send a copy to the house because we knew your mother went through his mail. We kept the original here, in my safe, and certified copies in 2 other law offices across the state. And the email alert? I asked. Sterling chuckled. That was Elliot's masterstroke. He said, Arthur, when I die, they won't call Hazel. They will try to do it all in the dark. I need a way to turn on the lights. He had me set up that specific alert trigger on the county database. He knew that the moment they tried to record a deed, any deed, you would get that ping. He wanted to make sure you had a head start. It worked, I said. It was the only reason I knew to look. Good, Sterling said. He reached into the folder and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with red wax. He also left you this. He made me promise not to give it to you unless the specific condition was met. The condition was, if they attempt to sell the house against my wishes. He handed me the envelope. They met the condition yesterday. My hands trembled as I took it. On the front, in Grandpa's familiar shaky block letters, was simply Hazel. I broke the seal. The wax crumbled under my thumb. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was clearer than I expected, likely written on a good day when the medication was working. My dearest Hazel, if you are reading this, it means they did it. I hoped they wouldn't. I hoped that once I was gone, they might find some dignity, but hope is not a strategy. As you and I know, I am sorry you have to be the adult again. I know you are tired. I know you spent years carrying me, and now you have to carry the cleanup. It isn't fair. You should be in your workshop building beautiful things, not fighting a war. But this house is yours. Not because you earned it, though you did. 1,000 times over, but because you are the only one who will listen to the floorboards. You are the custodian of our history. Do not let them bully you. Do not let them make you feel small. You are the strongest Lawson in 3 generations. I have left you the tools. Arthur knows the rest. Finish it. Love, Grandpa. I read it twice, the first time through the blur of tears, the second time with a hardening resolve. Finish it. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket, right next to my heart. He named you the sole executor, Sterling said, pulling me back to the present. The will they have, the one they were reading today. That was a draft from 10 years ago. They conveniently forgot about the updated one we filed last year. He slid a document across the small table. This is the current last will and testament of Elliot Langford. It revokes all previous wills. It names Hazel Marie Lawson as the sole executor and beneficiary of the residuary estate. But the house isn't in the estate, I said, because of the life estate deed. Correct, Sterling said. The house is already yours. This covers everything else, the furniture, the car, the personal effects, and it includes a very specific clause. He pointed to a paragraph on page 4. The in terrorem clause, Sterling said, also known as a no contest clause. It states that if any beneficiary challenges the validity of this will or the property transfer, they are automatically disinherited from any bequest they might have received. I looked at him. But if they get nothing anyway, what does the clause matter? They have nothing to lose. Sterling smiled a dry, thin smile. Ah, but that is the twist. Your grandfather didn't leave them nothing. I frowned. He didn't. No, Sterling said. He was very specific. He wanted to be fair. He felt that he had already given them their inheritance while he was alive. He just wanted to make sure it was documented. He reached into the folder again and pulled out a black, leather-bound ledger. He opened it to the first page. This, Sterling said, is the legacy of Cynthia, Gordon, and Sloane. I looked at the pages. It was an accounting, a brutal, meticulous accounting. August 12th, 2 years ago, loan to Gordon for business tax liability, $25,000, status unpaid. November 4th, 2 years ago, Cynthia, emergency roof repair for her vacation rental, $12,000, status unpaid. March 1st, last year Sloane, credit card payoff to avoid bankruptcy, $18,000, status unpaid. It went on for pages. Every time they had come to him with a sob story, every time they had guilt-tripped him into writing a check, he had recorded it. He had treated every transaction not as a gift, but as an advance on their inheritance. The total, Sterling said, tapping the bottom of the last page, is $450,000. I stared at the number. Nearly $500,000. They had drained him of $500,000 in 5 years. The will states that their inheritance is the forgiveness of these debts. Sterling explained. That is what he left them. He left them a clean slate. He forgave the loans. However, Sterling leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. If they contest the will, if they try to fight you for the house, the no contest clause kicks in. The forgiveness is revoked. The estate, meaning you, the executor, can immediately sue them for repayment of all these debts, with interest. My mouth fell open. It was a trap, a perfect, steel-jawed trap. If they walked away now, they got to keep the money they had already stolen. But if they tried to take the house, they would owe the estate nearly $500,000. They would be bankrupt. He thought of everything, I whispered. He wanted you to be safe, Sterling said. He knew the only way to stop them was to make it too expensive for them to fight. He closed the ledger. Now, about this sale to Brackenton Redevelopment. They forged the deed, I said. It is fraud. It is, Sterling agreed. But proving fraud takes time, and we have a closing that has already funded. The money is out. The deed is recorded. We need to stop the clock. He pulled a final stack of papers from the folder. This is a lis pendens, he said. A notice of pendency of action. It is a formal legal notice that we file with the county clerk. It alerts the world that there is a pending lawsuit concerning the title to this property. He handed me a pen, a heavy, expensive fountain pen. Once we file this, Sterling said, the property becomes radioactive. No title insurance company will touch it. No bank will lend against it. And Brackenton Redevelopment. Their lawyers will see it and panic. They will realize they don't have clear title. They will demand their money back from your parents immediately. And the bridge loan, I asked. The bridge lender will see the lis pendens and declare a default. Sterling said, your parents will be squeezed from both sides. The buyer wants the purchase price back. The lender wants the loan back. And they spent the fees. I looked at the document. Plaintiff Hazel Marie Lawson. Defendant Brackenton Redevelopment Group. Cynthia Lawson. Gordon Lawson. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was an eviction notice. I was evicting them from my life. They will hate me, I said quietly. They will say I ruined them. They ruined themselves, Sterling said gently. You are just turning on the lights. I thought about the lockbox on the porch. I thought about the new handle on the door. I thought about Sloane calling Grandpa a dead asset. I thought about my mother toasting to a fresh start, while she sold the only place that had ever felt like home. I took the cap off the pen. "For Grandpa," I said. I signed my name. The ink flowed dark and permanent onto the page. Hazel Marie Lawson. Sterling took the paper and nodded. "I will have this filed electronically within the hour. By 5 o'clock today. The title to 420 Harbor View Lane will be frozen solid." He stood up and extended his hand. "Congratulations, Hazel. You just took your house back." I shook his hand. "What do I do now?" "Now," Sterling smiled. "Now you go home, not to your workshop, to your house. You have a key. Don't you—" "The locks were changed," I said. "Hazel," Sterling said, looking at me with a twinkle in his eye that was pure Grandpa Elliot. "You are a restoration expert. You have a drill, and you are the legal owner of the property. I think you can figure out how to get in." I laughed. It was the first real laugh I had laughed in 2 days. "Yes," I said. "I think I can." I left the marina with the ledger in my bag and the letter in my pocket. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. I got into my truck and started the engine. I wasn't going back to the shop to hide. I was going to Harbor View Lane. I had a door to kick down. The sun had not even fully set over the marina when my phone began to vibrate against the center console of my truck. It was a number I did not recognize, an area code from Daito-C, but I answered it anyway. I was done hiding. "Is this Hazel Lawson?" The voice was male, loud, and possessed that specific kind of aggressive confidence that usually comes from wearing a suit that costs more than my truck. "Speaking," I said, putting the phone on speaker as I navigated the exit ramp back toward town. "This is Jason Vance," he said. "I represent Brackenton Redevelopment Group. We need to talk about this little stunt you pulled at the county clerk's office." "I assume you mean the lis pendens," I said. "It is not a stunt, Mr. Vance. It is a legal notification of a pending lawsuit regarding title fraud." "It is a nuisance filing," Vance snapped. "Listen to me. Miss Lawson, we have a valid deed. We have a funded closing. My crews are scheduled to start demolition on Monday morning. You are holding up development. You are costing me money every hour you play these games." "You don't have a valid deed," I corrected him. "You have a piece of paper signed by people who did not own the building. If you send a demolition crew to my property, I will have them arrested for trespassing and destruction of evidence." Vance laughed. A short, dismissive bark. "You clearly don't understand how real estate works. We bought the property in good faith. That makes us a bona fide purchaser. Your family squabbles are not my problem. If you don't withdraw that filing by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, we are going to countersue you for tortious interference, and we will come after your little restoration shop. Do you hear me?" "I hear you," I said. "But you should probably call your title insurance provider before you call your lawyers. Ask them about the life estate deed recorded 2 years ago. Have a nice evening." I hung up. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of the confrontation. They were rattled. You do not threaten a countersuit within 5 minutes unless you are terrified. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour copy center. I needed Wi-Fi that my family couldn't trace, and I needed to meet Marlene. She was waiting for me in her sedan, her face illuminated by the glow of her iPad. I climbed into her passenger seat. "That was the buyer," I said. "Jason Vance. He says he is a bona fide purchaser." Marlene snorted. "Bona fide my foot. Look at this." She turned the iPad toward me. It was open to Instagram. The profile belonged to Sloane. Marlene had scrolled back 42 weeks, to a series of photos from a summer weekend in the Hamptons. "Look at the guy in the background," Marlene said, tapping the screen. I looked. In the corner of a photo of Sloane holding a rosé bottle, there was a man in a white linen shirt, laughing with my father. He had a distinct, sharp jawline and a fade haircut. "That is Jason Vance," Marlene said. "He isn't just a random developer. He is in their social circle. He has been liking Sloane's posts for a year." I stared at the image. It was a sweetheart deal. It was an inside job. Marlene corrected. They didn't list the house on the open market. Hazel, if they had, a real realtor would have run a title check. They went directly to a friend who wanted the land and was willing to ask fewer questions in exchange for a discount. Vance knew they were desperate. He probably knew about the bridge loan too. He rushed the closing to help them out, thinking they could steamroll you later. So he is not an innocent buyer, I said. He is a co-conspirator. Exactly, Marlene said. And that destroys his good faith defense in court. But here is the ugly part. I called a friend of mine at the bank. I can't see the balances, but I can see the traffic. The traffic? The wire transfers, Marlene said grimly. The sale proceeds hit your parents' account yesterday afternoon. $2.2 million. Within 2 hours, 80% of it was moved. Moved where? Everywhere, she said. 4 separate wire transfers, one to a shell company in Delaware, one to a crypto exchange based in the Cayman Islands, one to a luxury dealership in Miami. Looks like Dad finally ordered that Porsche, and one massive payment to a private equity firm in New York. The bridge lender, I realized. They paid off the loan. They are scrubbing the accounts. Hazel, Marlene said. They are trying to make the money disappear so that even if you win the house back, there is no cash left to claw back. It is called a bust-out. They are burning the furniture to heat the house. My phone dinged with an email notification. It wasn't from Sterling. It was from Credit Karma. New inquiry detected. My stomach dropped. I opened the app. Inquiry from Coastal Verify Lending. Type home equity line of credit. The date was today. What is it? Marlene asked, seeing my face. They tried to take out a loan, I whispered. In my name. What? Look, I showed her the screen. A home equity line of credit. They must have realized the sale might get frozen, so they tried to leverage the equity in my shop, or maybe they tried to use my name as a guarantor for something else. They have your social security number, Marlene realized, from when you were on the family plan. From the tax returns you helped them file. The betrayal hit me harder than the sale of the house. The house was an object. This was my identity. They were willing to burn my financial future, my credit, my reputation, just to keep their lifestyle afloat for another week. They viewed me not as a daughter, but as a collateral asset. Drive, I told Marlene. I need to get to a computer. We went back to my workshop. I didn't care if they showed up again. I had work to do. I sat down and logged into the 3 major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I wasn't just freezing my credit. I was locking it down with the highest level of security available. I filed a fraud alert. I uploaded the police report I had filed online regarding the forged deed as supporting evidence. Reason for freeze identity theft by family member. Typing those words felt like closing a heavy iron door. It was final. I was officially designating my parents as criminals in the eyes of the federal financial system. You are doing the right thing, Marlene said, watching me from the doorway. I am not their daughter anymore, I said, hitting submit on the final form. I am just a victim of fraud. My phone rang again. This time, it was Arthur Sterling. Hazel, his voice was brisk. The temperature just changed. What happened? I asked. The title insurer received our list pendants, Sterling said, and they received a copy of the life estate deed. To put it mildly, they are freaking out. They are looking at a total loss claim of $2 million plus legal fees. Good, I said. It gets better, Sterling continued. The insurer called Swift River Title, the company that handled the closing, to demand the closing file. Specifically, they wanted to see the notary logbook to verify your grandfather's signature. Let me guess, I said. They can't find it. There was a server malfunction, Sterling said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. And the physical logbook was reportedly lost in a flood in their basement archive, which is fascinating, considering there hasn't been a drop of rain in West Virginia in 2 weeks. They are destroying evidence, I said. They are trying to, Sterling corrected, but the insurer isn't buying it. They have suspended Swift River's ability to issue policies effective immediately, and they have flagged the wire transfers. Flagged them how? They issued a recall notice on the funds, Sterling said. It is a banking protocol used for fraud. When a wire is connected to a criminal act, the sending bank can request the receiving banks to freeze the money. It doesn't always work if the cash is already withdrawn, but it freezes the accounts. Marlene said they moved the money to a crypto exchange and a car dealership, I said. The crypto might be gone, Sterling admitted. But the dealership that money is frozen. The dealership won't release the car. And the payment to the bridge lender that will get clawed back. The banking system moves slow, Hazel, until it thinks it is being robbed. Then it moves at the speed of light. So what does this mean for my parents? I asked. It means, Sterling said, that the quick cash they thought they had is now quicksand. The accounts they used to move the money are being locked for investigation. They can't access the remaining funds. They can't pay their bills. And since you cut off their credit cards, they effectively have $0. And the buyer? I asked. Jason Vance. Mr. Vance is currently trying to explain to his investors why he bought a house from a dead man. Sterling said, He is backing away from your family so fast, he is leaving skid marks. He will sue them by Monday to try and recover his deposit. I leaned back in my chair. The office was dark, lit only by the blue light of the monitor. They are going to come for me, I said. When the money stops working, they will come for me. Let them, Sterling said. You are safe. You are the executor. You are the owner. And you have the truth. Get some sleep. Hazel, tomorrow is going to be loud. I hung up. I looked at the credit report on my screen. The inquiry from Coastal Verify Lending was still there, a red mark against my name. I printed it out. I added it to the case file. Then I picked up the life estate deed. I folded it carefully. I wasn't going to sleep. I had one more stop to make. I drove back to Harborview Lane. It was midnight. The house sat dark and silent against the starry sky. The lockbox was still on the railing. I walked up the steps with my cordless drill. I didn't care about the alarm. I didn't care about the neighbors. I drilled out the lockbox. The metal shrieked as the bit bit into the cylinder, a harsh, grinding sound that tore through the quiet night. It took 3 minutes. The box fell open. The key fell out. I picked it up. It was a shiny new key, not the old brass one. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a smooth, soulless click. I opened the door and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. It didn't smell like Grandpa anymore. It smelled like lemon cleaner and stagnation. The air was stale. I flipped the light switch. The living room was empty. The Persian rug was gone. The leather armchairs were gone. The grandfather clock that had ticked in the hallway for 50 years was gone. My parents and Sloan had stripped it. They had sold everything that wasn't nailed down. I walked through the empty rooms, my boots echoing on the hardwood. The dining room was bare. The kitchen was stripped of its copper pots. I went up the stairs to Grandpa's bedroom. The bed was gone. But in the corner, pushed against the wall, was a small, battered, wooden chest. It was the sea chest I had made for him when I was 18. It was rough, amateur work, made before I really knew what I was doing. They hadn't taken it. It wasn't valuable enough. It didn't fit the aesthetic. I walked over to it and opened the lid. Inside were his old flannel shirts. They still smelled like him tobacco and sawdust. I sat down on the floor next to the chest and buried my face in his shirts. I breathed him in. I am here, Grandpa, I whispered into the flannel. I got back in. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my mother. My accounts are frozen. The bank says there is a fraud alert. What did you do? Fix this immediately, or I'm calling the police. I looked at the message. Then I looked at the empty room. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The police were already involved, just not the way she thought. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the driveway. I was alone in the empty house, but I didn't feel lonely. I felt occupied. I felt like the garrison had returned to the fort. I was the owner of 420 Harborview Lane, and I wasn't going anywhere. I spent the first night in the reclaimed house sleeping on the floor of the master bedroom, wrapped in a quilt I had found in my truck. I woke up not to the sound of birds or the ocean, but to the vibration of my phone against the hardwood. It was buzzing incessantly, a frantic, angry rhythm that told me the war had moved to a new front. I picked it up and squinted at the screen. My Instagram notifications were capped at 99 plus. My text inbox was full of messages from numbers I didn't know. The smear campaign had begun. I opened Instagram. Sloane had posted a photo. It was a black and white selfie, artfully blurry, showing her crying. She was wearing a hoodie, looking small and vulnerable, a stark contrast to the designer-clad shark she had been in my workshop yesterday. The caption was a masterclass in weaponized victimhood. I usually keep things positive here, but my heart is shattered. You think you know your family. You think you can trust the people you grew up with. But greed changes people. My sister has decided to sue our grieving parents over a technicality in our grandfather's will. She is trying to leave us homeless to satisfy some vendetta. We are heartbroken. But we will rise. Toxic family betrayal. Real estate. Nightmare survivor. I scrolled to the comments. It was a bloodbath. User Kate99. I am so sorry. Babe, money brings out the worst in people. With Jen sue her back. She sounds like a narcissist. Daily inspo. Stay strong. Sloane, your light shines brighter than her jealousy. Then the comments started appearing on my own business page for sable and stone restoration. Review from Sarah T1 star. Owner is a scam artist who steals from her elderly parents. Do not hire. Review from Mike D1 star. Unethical and greedy. Ruins families for cash. I watched the star rating of my business drop from a perfect 5 to a 3.2 in the span of an hour. My stomach churned. This was not just a family fight anymore. They were trying to destroy my livelihood. They knew that if they ruined my reputation, I wouldn't be able to afford the legal fight. I walked downstairs to the empty kitchen. I needed coffee, but there was no coffee maker. I sat on the counter, swinging my legs, and forced myself to breathe. Okay, I said aloud. They want a public fight. They want me to scream back. If I posted a defensive rant, I would look exactly like the crazy sister Sloane was painting me to be. I would be feeding the algorithm. My phone rang. It was Marlene. Don't look at the internet, she said immediately. Too late, I replied. I am currently a narcissistic scam artist who hates the elderly. Yeah, about that, Marlene said. I could hear the click of her keyboard in the background. I have been digging through the credit card statements, the ones you screenshotted before you cut them off. And Sloane is sloppy, Marlene said with a dark chuckle. She is so used to charging everything to the family account that she forgot to switch payment methods for her marketing expenses. I found 3 charges from yesterday evening to a company called ClickFarm Global. ClickFarm Global. It is a bot service, Marlene explained. You pay them, and they unleash a swarm of fake accounts to comment on your posts or attack your enemies. Those people calling you a scam artist, they aren't real. Hazel, half of them are IP addresses in Eastern Europe. Sloane is paying for the hate. She is spending money she doesn't have to ruin me, I said. She is trying to control the narrative, Marlene corrected. She knows the legal ground is crumbling, so she is trying to win the court of public opinion. She thinks if she makes you look bad enough, you will settle just to make it stop. I am not settling, I said. Good, but don't engage. If you argue with a bot, you look like a lunatic. I hung up. I looked at the hateful comments again. Now that I knew what to look for, I saw the pattern. The phrasing was repetitive, greedy, toxic, narcissist. They were using the same keywords over and over. I opened my laptop. I didn't reply to the comments. I didn't post a crying selfie. I wrote one single post on the Sable and Stone page. I attached a photo of the life estate deed redacted to protect sensitive info, but clearly showing the date and my name. To my clients and community, there is a complex legal matter regarding the estate of my late grandfather. I am resolving this through the proper channels in court, not on social media. I trust the truth will speak for itself. Thank you for your patience. I pinned the post. Then I turned off comments. I put the phone away. I had a house to measure. If I was going to restore this place, I needed to know exactly what they had stripped out. By noon, the atmosphere shifted. The silence from my end seemed to unnerve them. They expected a scream. I gave them a lawyer's brief. At 1 o'clock, the deal arrived. It came via email from my father, carbon copied to Mr. Henderson, the old family lawyer who was clearly being dragged along against his will. Hazel, we are willing to put this ugliness behind us. We have secured a secondary investor who is willing to cover the gap. We are prepared to offer you $50,000 in cash, immediately, in exchange for your signature on the quitclaim deed and a dismissal of the lis pendens. This is a generous offer. It is more than you would make in 2 years at your shop. Take the money. Let the family heal. Dad, $50,000. They were offering me 2% of the sale price. They were offering me crumbs from a loaf they had stolen from my kitchen. I forwarded the email to Arthur Sterling with a single question mark. Sterling called me 10 seconds later. Do not even reply to that, he said, his voice hard. It is a trap. I figured that, I said. 50,000 is an insult. It isn't about the amount, Sterling said. It is about the signature. Hazel, listen to me carefully. The moment you sign that quitclaim deed, you validate the chain of title. You are effectively saying, yes, there was a dispute, but I am resolving it by transferring my interest. If you sign that, the fraud goes away, the sale becomes legal, the bridge loan gets paid, and you lose the house forever. They are trying to buy a clean title for 50 grand, I said. Exactly. They are desperate. That bridge loan is accruing interest at probably 20% a day. They are bleeding out. They need you to apply the tourniquet. Tell them no, I said. Tell them the price is the keys, the deed, and an apology they are incapable of giving. I will tell them to see us in court tomorrow, Sterling said. The hearing is set for 9 in the morning. Judge Patterson. He is a stickler for paperwork. He is going to eat them alive. The rest of the day passed in a strange, suspended tension. I walked the property line. I found where my father had driven his truck over Grandpa's azaleas. I found the spot on the porch where the new movers had gouged the wood, dragging the furniture out. Every scar on the house made my resolve harder. Night fell. The house was dark and echoing. I had brought a camping lantern from my truck. Its harsh LED light cast long, dancing shadows on the empty walls. At 9 o'clock, my phone rang. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't a bot. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. Mom's cell. I debated letting it ring. But some part of me, the part that was still a little girl wanting her mother's approval, needed to hear what she would say. I answered. Hello? Hazelbug. The nickname hit me like a physical blow. She hadn't called me that since I was 10. Her voice was wet, thick with tears. It wasn't the angry, imperious tone she had used in the workshop. It was the soft, broken voice she used when she wanted something she couldn't buy. Hi, Mom, I said, guarding my voice. I am so tired. Hazel, she whispered. I am just so tired. Why are we doing this? We are family. I changed your diapers. I sat up with you when you had the chickenpox. How did we get here? You sold my house, I said. You forged a deed. We made a mistake, she sobbed. We were drowning. Hazel, your father, he made bad investments. We were going to lose our own house. We didn't want to worry you. We thought if we sold the shore house, we could pay everything off, set you up with some cash, and everyone would be safe. We were trying to protect you. Protect me, I asked, looking around the empty room. By stealing from me, by calling me toxic on the internet, by destroying my business credit. That was Sloane, she said quickly. You know how she is. She is impulsive. I told her to stop. But Hazel, please, if we go to court tomorrow, if you show that judge those papers, your father could go to jail. Do you want that? Do you want your father in prison? The guilt surged up, hot and suffocating. Prison. It was a terrifying word. He committed a crime. Mom, he is 60 years old, she cried. He has high blood pressure. He won't survive it. Hazel, please, just sign the paper. Take the money. We will go away. We will move to Florida. You will never see us again. Just don't send your father to jail. Do it for me. Do it for the mom who loves you. I closed my eyes. I gripped the phone so hard my hand cramped. It would be so easy. Just sign. Take the 50,000. Let them run. Keep the family out of the news. Then I remembered the ledger. I remembered the $450,000 they had already drained from Grandpa. I remembered Grandpa sitting in his chair, wearing a sweater with a hole in the elbow because he couldn't afford a new one, while my mother drove a new Lexus. I remembered the text. At least Hazel isn't here to make this weird. You don't love me, Mom, I said into the darkness. What? Of course I do. No, I said, my voice steadying. You love that I was useful. You love that I took care of Grandpa so you didn't have to. You love that I paid the bills. And now you love that I am the only thing standing between you and the consequences of your own greed. Hazel, don't be cruel. I am not being cruel, I said. I am being an adult. Grandpa told me I would have to be the adult. If you do this, she said, her voice suddenly turning cold, dropping the mask instantly. You are dead to us. Do you hear me? You will have no family. I haven't had a family for a long time, I said. I just had dependents. I hung up. I sat there in the silence, shaking. It hurt. It hurt worse than the anger. It felt like I had just cut off my own arm, but I knew the bleeding would stop. If I had stayed attached to them, the rot would have killed me. I turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear from them again. The next morning, the day of the hearing, the sky was a brilliant, hard blue. I put on my best suit, a charcoal gray blazer I usually saved for meeting high-end clients. I drove to Arthur Sterling's office. He was waiting for me in the lobby. He looked calm, dressed in a three-piece suit that looked like it belonged in a period drama. How are you holding up? He asked. I blocked them, I said. All of them? Good, Sterling said, because the other side is getting loud. He led me into a conference room. Jason Vance's legal team sent over a threat this morning. They are claiming they will bury us in discovery motions. They are threatening to depose you for days. They want to make this so expensive and painful that you quit. I won't quit, I said. I know, Sterling said, but we are not going to let it get that far. We aren't going to fight a long war. Hazel, we are going to end it in the opening statement. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver USB drive. Your grandfather knew that documents can be boring, Sterling said. He knew that judges see paperwork all day long. He wanted to make sure there was no ambiguity, no interpretation, no, he said, she said. What is that? I asked. This, Sterling said, is a video affidavit. We recorded it the day he signed the life estate deed. It has been in my safe deposit box ever since. He plugged the drive into the conference room TV. The screen flickered, then resolved into a clear image. Grandpa Elliot was sitting in his favorite leather armchair, the one they had sold. He looked healthier than I remembered him at the end. His eyes were bright blue and sharp. He was looking directly into the camera lens. My name is Elliot Langford, the video grandpa said. His voice filled the room, warm and familiar, making my chest ache. Today is October 14th. I am of sound mind and body. I am recording this statement to accompany the life estate deed I am signing today. He leaned forward slightly. I am leaving my home to my granddaughter, Hazel Lawson, and I am doing it this way through a life estate because I do not trust my son Gordon or my daughter-in-law Cynthia to respect my wishes after I'm gone. I gasped. He had said it. He had put it on the record. They have pressured me for years to sell. Grandpa continued. They have asked for loans they never repay. They view this property as a bank account. It is not a bank account. It is my home. And Hazel is the only one who has ever treated it with respect. He paused, and his expression softened. If you are watching this, he said, staring right at me across time, It means they tried to take it. It means they found a way to work around the will. So let me be clear to any judge, jury, or title company watching this, I did not sell this house to them. I did not give them permission to sell it. Any document claiming otherwise is a lie. This house belongs to Hazel, and anyone trying to take it from her is stealing from a dead man. The video ended. The screen went black. The room was silent. I wiped a tear from my cheek. That, Sterling said, pulling the drive out, is what we call a smoking gun. They have no idea this exists, I said. No, Sterling said. They think they are walking into a paperwork dispute. They think they can argue that Grandpa was confused, or that the life estate was a mistake. They are going to walk into court, puff up their chests, and lie. He smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth. And then, he said, we are going to press play. He checked his pocket watch. It is 8:30, Sterling said. Court starts in 30 minutes. The buyer is threatening to countersue. Your parents are claiming they are the victims. Let them... He stood up and opened the door. Tomorrow. Your grandpa speaks. Shall we go? I stood up. I smoothed my blazer. I thought about the $50,000. I thought about the toxic family posts. I thought about the Click Farm bots. Yes, I said. Let's go. County Superior Court, room 304, smelled like floor wax and anxiety. It was a smell I knew well from my restoration work, the scent of institutions trying to cover up the decay beneath the surface. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Arthur Sterling. On the other side of the aisle sat my parents and Sloan. They were dressed in their Sunday best, my father in a navy suit that was straining at the buttons, my mother in a modest gray dress she usually reserved for funerals, and Sloan in a high-necked blouse that was clearly an attempt to look like a serious person rather than an influencer. They wouldn't look at me. They stared straight ahead at the judge's empty bench, their postures rigid. Next to them, separated by a distinct gap of 3 empty chairs, sat Jason Vance and his legal team. Vance looked bored, tapping a gold pen against his expensive watch, as if this were just a zoning hearing he could buy his way out of. All rise, the bailiff called out. Judge Patterson entered. He was a man with a face like carved granite and a reputation for having zero patience for foolishness. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked over the rim of them at the packed courtroom. We are here on an emergency motion regarding the title of the property at 420 Harbor View Lane, Judge Patterson said. His voice was a low rumble. Let us begin. Vance's lawyer, a sharp-featured man named Mr. Klein, stood up first. He didn't waste time. Your Honor, Klein began, smoothing his tie. This case is a simple property dispute that has been blown out of proportion by a disgruntled heir. My client, Brackenton Redevelopment Group, purchased this property in good faith. We paid $2.2 million. The deed was recorded. The funds were disbursed. We are bona fide purchasers for value. The plaintiff's late filing of a lis pendens is nothing more than an attempt to extort a settlement from her grieving family and stall legitimate economic development. He gestured toward me with a dismissive wave of his hand. Miss Lawson is upset that she was not included in the sale. We understand that, but family feelings do not invalidate a legal contract. I felt my blood pressure spike, but Sterling placed a calming hand on my arm. He stood up slowly. He didn't wave his hands. He didn't raise his voice. He walked to the podium with the weight of a man carrying a stone tablet. Your Honor, Sterling said, Mr. Klein is correct about one thing. His client paid $2.2 million. Unfortunately, he paid it to people who had absolutely no right to sell the property. Sterling picked up the life estate deed we had retrieved. 2 years ago, Sterling continued, Elliot Langford executed this deed. It granted him a life estate, the right to live in the home until death, and transferred the remainder interest, the ownership of the property after death, to his granddaughter, Hazel Lawson. He handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. This deed was recorded, Sterling said. It is a matter of public record. The moment Elliot Langford died 4 months ago, the life estate extinguished. The property became the sole, fee simple property of Hazel Lawson, by operation of law. Judge Patterson studied the paper. He flipped to the second page. He looked at the date stamp. "So," the judge said, looking up at Vance's lawyer, "when the defendants Mr. and Mrs. Lawson signed a deed selling this property to your client last week, they did not own it." "They had a quit-claim deed," Klein argued, though he sounded less confident, "dated 6 months ago." "A quit-claim deed transfers whatever interest the grantor has," Sterling interjected smoothly. 6 months ago, Elliot Langford only had a life estate. Even if that deed were genuine, and we contest that it is, he could only have transferred his life estate. That interest died when he did. You cannot sell a house you do not own. Mr. Klein, it does not matter how much money you pay for it. The judge turned his gaze to my parents. My father was sweating. I could see the sheen of it on his forehead under the harsh fluorescent lights. "I see a representative from the title insurance company here," Judge Patterson said. "Ms. Chang, please approach." A woman in a sharp black suit stood up from the gallery. She looked furious. She walked to the witness stand. "Ms. Chang," the judge asked, "your company insured this title. Did you miss the life estate deed?" "We did not run the search, Your Honor," Ms. Chang said, her voice icy. "The closing was handled by Swift River Title. We are the underwriter. However, upon review of the file yesterday, we found significant irregularities. The life estate deed was missed. Furthermore, we have been unable to verify the notary log for the seller's deed. The closing was rushed. Standard verification protocols were bypassed at the request of the buyer and the seller." Vance stopped tapping his pen. He sat up straighter. The good faith argument was evaporating. They had bypassed protocols. That wasn't good faith. That was negligence. "It seems," Judge Patterson said, leaning back, "that the foundation of this sale is rotten." "Your Honor," my mother suddenly spoke up. She stood, clutching her purse. "We didn't know. We thought Dad told us he wanted us to have the house. He was confused at the end. We were just trying to follow his wishes. We are his family." "Sit down, Mrs. Lawson," the judge warned. "We are the victims here," she cried, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "My daughter is manipulating the facts. Her grandfather loved us. He would never have cut us out." Sterling looked at me. He nodded. "Your Honor," Sterling said, "if the court permits, we have one final piece of evidence regarding the decedent's state of mind and his intentions." He held up the silver USB drive. "A video affidavit," Sterling said, "recorded by Elliot Langford on the day he signed the life estate deed." My mother froze. She slowly sank back into her chair. Sloane looked at the door, as if calculating whether she could run for it. The bailiff took the drive. A moment later, a large screen on the side wall flickered to life. The courtroom went dead silent. There was Grandpa. He was wearing his favorite flannel shirt. He looked frail, but his eyes were sharp. "My name is Elliot Langford," the video Grandpa said. His voice echoed through the room, warm and steady. I watched my father flinch at the sound of his father's voice. "I am recording this statement," Grandpa continued on the screen, "because I do not trust my son Gordon or my daughter-in-law Cynthia to respect my wishes." A gasp ran through the gallery. This wasn't legal boilerplate. This was personal. "On August 12th, Grandpa recited, holding up a piece of paper in the video. "Gordon demanded I mortgage the house to pay for his business taxes. I refused. On November 4th, Cynthia told me I belonged in a home and that I was selfish for holding on to this asset." My mother put her hand over her mouth. "They have tried to coerce me," Grandpa said, his voice hardening. "They have tried to trick me into signing papers I could not read. That is why I am signing this life estate deed today. I am removing the temptation. This house belongs to Hazel. She is the only one who has ever asked me how I am, rather than where the money is." The video Grandpa leaned into the camera. "If you are watching this, it means they have ignored my will. It means they have tried to take what is not theirs. Do not let them. I revoke any permission, implied or explicit, for them to act on my behalf." The screen went black. For 10 seconds. Nobody moved. The silence was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a narrative collapsing. The caring family act. The confused old man's story. It was all dust. "Well," Judge Patterson said. The single word landed like a gavel strike. He looked at my parents. His expression was no longer one of judicial neutrality. It was one of disgust. "This court finds," the judge stated, "that the sale to Brackenton Redevelopment Group is void ab initio. The sellers had no title to convey. The life estate deed is valid. The property belongs to Hazel Lawson." "Your Honor," Vance's lawyer shouted, "my client is out $2 million. "Then I suggest you look to the people who took it," the judge snapped. "I am issuing an immediate order freezing all assets belonging to Gordon and Cynthia Lawson. I am also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for an investigation into fraud, forgery, and elder abuse." My father put his head in his hands. "No," Sloan screamed. "You can't freeze the assets, we have expenses." "Not anymore," the judge said. "Court is adjourned." The gavel came down. The chaos that followed was immediate. Jason Vance turned on my father, his face purple with rage. He was shouting about lawsuits, about fraud, about ruining them. My mother was sobbing, pulling at Mr. Henderson's sleeve, asking if she was going to jail. I stood up. I felt light. Sterling packed his briefcase calmly. "Well done, Hazel." "Thank you," I said. I didn't look at my parents. I walked past them. Sloan tried to grab my arm as I passed. "Hazel," she hissed. "You did this. You ruined us." I stopped. I looked at her. "No, Sloan," I said quietly. "You spent money you didn't have to sell a house you didn't own. You ruined yourselves. I just turned on the lights." I walked out of the courtroom. I walked out of the courthouse. I walked out into the bright, blinding sunshine of the street. I got into my truck and drove. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the wind rushing past the window. I drove past the marina. I drove past my workshop. I drove all the way to Harbor View Lane. The lockbox was gone. I had removed it. The for sale sign was gone. I had pulled it out of the ground and thrown it in the trash. I walked up the steps. The wood was warm under my boots. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was still empty. The echoes were still there. But the heavy, suffocating feeling of invasion was gone. It felt clean. The sun was streaming through the bay windows, casting long rectangles of light across the dust motes dancing in the air. I walked to the kitchen. I remembered the spot under the silverware drawer. It was a place Grandpa used to tape emergency cash when I was a kid. Mad money, he used to call it. I pulled the drawer all the way out and set it on the counter. I felt underneath the cabinet frame. My fingers brushed against paper. I peeled it off. It wasn't cash. It was a small, folded piece of graph paper from his workshop. I unfolded it. "Now make it yours." It read in his familiar scrawl. Not to prove anything, just to live. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 2 years. I wasn't the guardian anymore. I wasn't the nurse. I wasn't the defender. I was just Hazel. And this was just my house. I walked into the living room and sat down in the center of the floor, right in a patch of sunlight. I closed my eyes and listened. I could hear the ocean. I could hear the house settling, the wood expanding in the warmth. I was home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a long journey for Hazel, but justice was finally served. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop a comment below sharing your city or country, and let's get a conversation started. If you enjoyed seeing Hazel take back what was hers, please make sure to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Stay safe, and see you in the next one.